Gewaltig. Okay, that's the head of the Gemara. Yesterday, we learned about being made for Nedarim on Shabbos and being mater Nedarim on Shabbos. And we learned that you could be made for Nedarim on Shabbos depending on whether or not you have 24 hours to do the Hafara or if you only have that day. So the Gemara said the Gemara said it was a machlokes tanoim. If you only have that day, it's mistaber to say that you should be able to be made for Nedarim even not l'Torah Shabbos, which is how we paskin. The Ran says, but if you hold that you have 24 hours from when you heard about the neder to be made for it, then you should not be made for a neder unless it's l'Torah Shabbos. But when it comes to she'ela by a chacham, there you need to be l'Torah Shabbos in order to be able to make she'ela. We also learned that she'ela on a neder is not as serious as a regular din Torah, and therefore you could be shoyel on a neder oimed even if the dayan is standing. And the Gemara said that depends on whether or not you could be paisech b'charata or not. If charata is enough, the dayan doesn't have to think into it too much. He could paskin while he's standing, but if he has to come up with a real Pesach, then he would have to sit to focus. Yechidi could be one yochid mumcha. You don't need to have three people necessarily. It could be done by night, unlike a din Torah. It could be done on Shabbos, unlike a din Torah. And you can even use relatives to be shoyel on a neder. That's what we learned yesterday. We are up to now the bottom of Ayin Zayin and Beis, which would be the first wide line. Lo yomer adam le'ishtoi. A person shouldn't tell his wife the Shabbos on Shabbos, mufar lechi, batal lechi, kederech she'omer lo b'choil, which would be the same way he would make a hafara or a kiyam. Or a hafara only in the weekdays. Ella omer lo teliva achli. Let's say she made a neder not to have this type of food. He could take this type of food and give it to her and tell her eat it. That could be his expression of hafara. Or Kli Yosy, she made a neder not to drink something. He could hand her that drink and say, "Please have some to drink." Thank you very much for that. Neder butter me'elav, and the neder will be bottled by itself. So it's more of a subtle expression, not coming so clearly outright and saying, Rabbi Yochanan added, since he's not using the right nusach, the right syntax in his hafara, he's saying tliva achli or tliva shasi. In his mind, he has to say those words that it should be mufar. So the Ran told us that a shavacha loshen of hafara, like tliva achli, tliva shasi, works if you have kavanah. Unlike the brisa that we learned earlier, where the loshen hafara that in the second shot of the Ran we said didn't work, is called Nedarim shetaduri evshi. Or in another, those are not good expressions of hafara. Those are not good expressions of hafara if you don't have the bittul b'leiv. But coupled up with the bittul b'leiv, they're, if anything, better than tliva achli, tliva shasi. So a shavacha expression of hafara works with bittul b'leiv. Tanya b'shamay omer b'shabbos mevatal b'liboy and b'choil moitzi b'svasov. You articulate the hafara properly. Even b'choil, you can use a subtle lashon as long as you combine it with bittul b'leiv. How is a baal made for another? He says mufar lecha. What if the chacham says mufar lecha? It won't work. Ubal she'amar b'lashon chacham. Or if a baal said mutar lecha, lo yamar klum. Those are not good expressions of hafara or hatara if they're using the wrong language. The Tanya we learned zeh hadavar. In the pasuk it says at the beginning of the pasuk it says Vaydaber Moshe al Roshei Hamatos Levnei Yisrael Lemar zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem needs to be precise. Hachacham matir vein baal matir. A chacham could be matir that the baal cannot be matir. Let's just either run for the exact nusach. Amar Rabbi Yochanan chacham shomer b'lashon baal dahainu mufar lecha, u'baal shomer b'lashon chacham shomer mutar lech. Lashon baal who meforshu b'chasuv dahainu lashon hafara. The Lashon that the Baal says Hatoras refers to the Hefer law. It actually uses that word exactly. The Lashon Chacham, that a mutalech, mashmalei, where do you see that in the Torah? Midichsiv lo yachel devarai, a person is not allowed to be meichel his own words. Kloimer lo yased varachulin, udarshinin aval acher meichel amoy. But a third party, the Rav, could be miyachel his words. She'oishnoi say chulin, he could make the words chulin. Uvechulin muter shaykh le'memer bahu. So if the dayan is making your words chulin based on the lo yachel devarai that the Torah says, so the word muter lecha is the right expression. It becomes chulin. But if we're talking hafara, then the word muter lechi doesn't work for that. It's not the right expression. The Torah gives you the right expression. The Torah says it's called hafara, so you say mufer lechi. Okay, Dr. Ramvatu, Yushalmi mashma the chacham nami motzi ka'amar ein kan neder ein kan shvua. So in the Yushalmi it's mashma that the chacham is not limited to saying the word muter lechi, like the Baal is limited to say the word mufer lechi. The chacham could also use a different language, and that is ein kan neder, which we actually say. We say I call you mufer lech, kol muter lech, ein kan neder v'lo shvu. We wrote a book at it. The Garas Hasam, Baal Shomer B'Loshen Chacham, the Chacham Shomer B'Loshen Baal, Loy Omar Klum, it's not an expression at all of Hatorah or of Hafara. Elazeh Omer Kehel Chasoi, V'zeh Omer Kehel Chasoi. Each one has to use the expression that's appropriate for him. Habal Omer Mufalech, V'Zokad Omer, Ein Kan Neder, Ein Kan Shvua. So you see that will work for Hatoras Chacham. V'zeh Mashmali, the list of the Mefer, now if you analyze this quickly, we see that the Lashon of Hafara is Shaykh Mekan Veilach. It's Mufer Lecha from now and moving forward. But the Lashon of the Mutter is B'dover Shei Mutter Mekare. When you ask the Rav, I mixed this into that, am I allowed to use it after Kasher? And he says Mutter, he's not saying that it was Osir until now and now I'm being matir. The Chacham is not creating anything at all. The Chacham is merely telling me what the Metzias is. So Mutter Lecha means it's always Mutter. And that's why in Kan Neder it's Lamafreya, it's Oikod Neder Lamafreya. Hafara only works Mikan Ulahabon. So Zok the Gemara. Zok the Hela Gemara. We would have a Kal V'chomer, that maybe one could work. You could use that the expressions might be interchangeable. Because Umma Chacham She'ein Mefer. A Chacham is weaker, he can't be Mefer. Nevertheless, he could be Matir. Baal Shemefer, a Baal could be Mefer, Ein Edin Shematir. Surely he should be able to be Matir. Talmud Loimar, the pasuk tells us Zeh Hadavar, Chacham Matir, Vein Baal Matir. Okay, it's very interesting because this is like the Ganav's Kal V'chomer, right? The Ganav's Kal V'chomer is Madech my pocket, which I don't have access to. I'm sorry, Madech my pocket with you, which you don't have access to. I have access to your pocket, where even you have access to. Surely I should have access to your pocket. With the Chacham and the Baal being Mefer, what's the Kal V'chomer? Madech Chacham, who can't be Mefer, he could be Matir. A Baal who could be Mefer, and the Nisha Matir. Yeah, but who's the Baal can be Matir? So it's almost a circular Kal V'chomer. But at the end of the day, Zehadavar tells us that each thing is precise. Hafara is Hafara, and that's for the Baal. Hatoras is Hatoras, and that's for the Chacham. Tanya Nechilunit. Zehadavar Baal Mefer, Ben Chacham Mefer. Which is exactly the opposite. Sheyach Uma Baal Shein Matir Mefer Chacham Shematir Edin Shemefer Hamalom Zehadavar Baal Mefer Ben Chacham Mefer. Whenever you can equally make a Kal V'chomer both ways, that's the guy who's Kal V'chomer, right? Because he can make the same Kal V'chomer on you. Zok Gemara Nemer Kan Zehadavar, Nemer Lahalon Zehadavar. It says Zehadavar in reference to Nedarim, and it says Zehadavar at the introduction to the parsha of Shchutei Chutz. In the parsha of Shchutei Chutz, the Torah is telling us that you're not allowed to shech the korban out of the Beis Hamikdash. Ma b'Shchutei Chutz, just like by Shchutei Chutz, who is prohibited from doing Shchutei Chutz? Aaron, Uvanov, V'chol Yisrael. It's not an exclusive type of mitzvah; it applies to everybody. Af Parshas Nedarim, so too Parshas Nedarim, Aaron, Uvanov, V'chol Yisrael. It applies to everybody, meaning anybody could be matir the neder, not just a chacham. Umakan Rosh Hamatos, and just like it says by Nedarim, Rosh Hamatos, meaning only the Rabbonim, only the leaders could be Matir Nedarim. Aflalon Roshei Matos, so too by Shchutei Chutz. So let's think about it. By Nedarim, it seems to indicate that the Roshei Matos have to be Matir, not anybody. The Pasuk of Shchutei Chutz indicates that it applies to everybody. So what the Gemara is going to do is the Gemara is going to show that even by Nedarim, there's an element of everybody, even though it says Roshei Matos. And even by Shchutei Chutz, where it says everybody, there's also a concept of Roshei Matos. And the Gemara is going to theorize how this works. Parashas Nedarim, L'ma Hilchasa. Why does it say? What does it teach us by Parashas Nedarim? What are we learning from Shchutei Chutz about Kol Yisrael? How does that apply to Parashas Nedarim? Not only do you need to go to a dayan to be matir your neder, you can even go to Shloisha Yotos, which is our Hatoras Nedarim. How could you say that? Well, Roshei Matos. It says Roshei Matos in the pasuk of Nedarim itself. When it says Roshei Matos by Nedarim, it means to tell us that if you're going to have one person by himself being matir your neder, yes, then you need a Roshei Matos. But if you have three people, then you could learn that from Shchutei Chutz that it could be anybody. And we're going to soon see that anybody doesn't mean everybody. Let's see the Heilig around. Ma b'Shchutei Chutz Aaron Ubanav b'Chol Yisrael tachsid b'Reish Parsha daber el Aaron vel Banav vel Kol Bnei Yisrael shekulan shavim ba. After Parshas Nedarim, Aaron Ubanav b'Chol Yisrael to kulan ksheir in the Hatoras and Neder. Umakan Roshei Matos, just like it says Roshei Matos by Nedarim. With Nedarim, the Roshei Matos ksibuhu apalon b'Shchutei Chutz Roshei Matos mufarish lekamon l'ma hilchasa. Amar Bacha b'Yaakov l'hachshish loished yotos. Zokt the Heilig Aran. Don't think it means everybody. Hi had yotos the aminon loy kulu had yotos ksheir. Not everybody is kosher to be matir and neder. Elahanu the chimazber lahu miyasafri. Only someone, although they don't know the halacha, but they have enough intelligence that if you explain to them the reasoning for the Hatorah and how it works, it's something that they'll understand. Like we learned earlier. Three people who understand how to make a Pesach, they can be matir just like a single zakin. Of course, Nedarim and Shchutei Chutz are very different from one another. Anybody, it's usher, even someone who has no intelligence whatsoever, even such a person is prohibited from Shchutei Chutz. And therefore, you can't really have the exact Gzeir Shava to apply exactly the same halachas from Nedarim to Shchutei Chutz and vice versa. It's not shver, it's a loose Gzeir Shava. The memela mashma hai chidinei by chidinei. Each halacha that we learn, whether it's to Shchutei Chutz or whether it's to Nedarim, it would be appropriate for its halacha. For instance, the yoidos, the geria kula hai, the afilu ki mazber hu loy sabri, someone who has such a lack of intelligence that even if you try to explain to them how these things work, they still wouldn't be able to grasp it. Sabi de basanin. I guess that's an expression for someone who has no shaykhs. Upshita de lechazu lahat nedarim. Surely, such a person with no intelligence at all can be matir nedarim. Surely they cannot. Since they don't understand anything, they don't even know what they're doing. So basically, what we're saying is, whichever minimal knowledgeable person is acceptable for nedarim, three of them will be good enough. And that's what we learn from Shchutei Chutz. But of course, not opening it up completely to anybody who has no svar at all. I fact the Gemara by Nedarim says Roshei Matos umashma aval joytos loy. So how could you import this halacha from Shchutei Chutz that it's open to everybody? And for the Gemara by Yochid Mumcha, the Kimin Gzeir Shava Marbi Hedjoytos, we have sort of contradictory limudim. The Gzeir Shava seems to indicate even Hedjoytos are good for Hatoras Nedarim. For Roshei Matos, that's written in the Parsha of Nedarim itself, Memaitlu limits it to only Rosh and Matos. Al Korach Islu the Kiyumi Tavayu. We have to find a way to make them both true. Rosh and Matos is biyochid if an individual is going to be being matter another. But if there's three people, then hadyotis are enough. I see you might ask me, all it says is Chol Yisrael. Where did you get number 3 from? Where does the Gemara get the number 3 from? Zok Duran, and this is very controversial. Even the mafkas mechad, once it's not 1, so the next logical step is going to be 3. Because that's how a normal bezdin works. So Duran is saying it has to go to a regular bezdin. We need to know, why does a regular bezdin need 3? Where does that come from? So let's have a look quickly at the Rosh. Zok the Rosh, Utrei have a bezdin shakel. You couldn't have 2. Why? Because 2 would be a bezdin shakel, and if there was a disagreement, we wouldn't have a resolution. That's why you need 3. You for sure need 3. So really the question is, once there's a halach that a bezdin needs 3, doesn't need 3 everywhere, because now that's a din bezdin, or maybe it would only need 3 where you have something that could be a controversy. But let's say it's something that doesn't require a controversy. Maybe then you don't need to have a bezdin of 3. So it seems like the Rosh says you only need it because you don't want a bezdin shakel, which means you only need 3 when you're going to have a problem with a bezdin shakel, where there's some type of dion that there's going to be different opinions on. But from the Ran, it's mashma that once there was a din that you need 3, every bezdin is automatically 3, and without 3, it won't be a bezdin at all, because there is a shaila about that. It's like similar to the following shaila. Bishul Akum is usher, right? Why is Bishul Akum usher? Because we don't want people fraternizing, socializing with goyim, right? That's why Bishul Akum is usher. So let me ask you a question. What if you have something that was cooked by a goy and you cooked it now in your pot? Does it answer your pot? It does. But why? It's not a Ma'chalos. The whole reason why Bishul Akum is usher is to prevent socializing. So why should it please be usher? The teretz is, once they Chazal made Bishul Akum usher, now it has a din of Chazer. It has a din of Ma'chalos, and even its blias will be usher. So that's similar to bezdin. Once they set up that a bezdin is a bezdin of 3, that's what a bezdin is now, and whatever you would need a bezdin for would require 3, even though the initial reasoning for requiring 3, which is the odd number, is not valid. We're not relevant. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. So we've explained what we learned to Nedarim. We learned to Nedarim from Shchut Echutz that 3 hadyotos are able to be matter and nether. But what are we exporting? What is Nedarim exporting with Rosh Hamatos to Shchut Echutz? Of Rapsheshes Loimar Sheyesh She'ela B'Hektish, to tell you that you could undo Hektish. Zok Tehela Garad Shloim She'ela B'Hektish Shem Hektish Behema B'Shachta B'Chutz. What if you were Makdish of Behema and you made Shchut Echutz the Achgach Nishal Allah, and then you were shoyl on the Hektish? So L'Mafreya, it turns out that you did not do Shchut Echutz because the animal was never a carbon. Potter, you'll be potter. The Chivin Sheyesh She'ela B'Hektish. It's as if you were never makdish it. The chacham leker and neder meikar. So they're asking the shaila in the Rishonim: is one mechuyev to do that? Someone was makdish an animal fair and square, and he made shchut echutz on it. So what is he supposed to do? Should he just do tshuva, or is he mechuyev to be shoyel on the hektish so that he could undo his aver? So there's actually a shaila like that. If a person is supposed to be shoyel on something so that he could retroactively remove the aver. I don't know. Maybe as far as once you did b'shas ma'aseh, you did an aver. So now it's supposed to tshuva. It's a good child. It's a good child to discuss whether or not tshuva works better. Okay. Let's see the Hegel more about you. I'll just tell you if you brought it up, which is Shuva better. Rabbi Robinson said over from Shlomo Miller, and he asked the following question. There's the why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make the Eitz HaChaim? That was the question. The question is, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make the Eitz HaChaim? Before Adam did the Avera, he was going to live forever. He didn't need the Eitz HaChaim. And afterwards, Hashem threw him out. So what was the whole purpose of the Eitz HaChaim? Another question. So Rav Shlomo said, the Eitz HaChaim was made for after Adam did an Avera, if he would do tshuva, he could go eat from the Eitz HaChaim and restore it completely. So why couldn't Adam eat from the Eitz HaChaim? So Shlomo said, if Adam would have done tshuva immediately when HaKadosh Baruch Hu confronted him, he didn't say, she gave it to me, he would have said, Chatasi of Isu Peshaiti, Hashem would have told him, go eat from the Eitz HaChaim, and you're going to be restored to your original Madrega. But since at first he denied it, sure, Adam ended up doing tshuva for hundreds and hundreds of years later. But since he originally done it, he lost his ability to use the Eitz HaChaim. But the HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the Eitz HaChaim into the world because the Rebbeinu Shalom put tshuva into the world, and tshuva restores somebody to his original Madrega. So tshuva is a gavaldik thing. Yeah, but the problem is if you do Averis with the intent of doing tshuva, that might not let you do tshuva. Okay, so Zok Gemara, this works are really good according to Beis Hillel, that there's She'ela Behektish, and we learned that from Rashi Matos. But Zok Gemara, Libei Shammai, who holds that ain't She'ela Behektish, so Rashi Matos Tichsev B'Shchut Echutz L'mai Hilchusa. What is Rashi Matos teaching us? Zok Gemara, Beis Shammai less Lu Gzeir Shava. Beis Shammai didn't have the Kabbalah from his Rebbe, the Chalal is such a Gzeir Shava. So therefore, you don't need to learn anything from Rosh Hashanah to the Parsha of Shchut Echutz because there's no Gzeir Shava. Ze Adavar the Parshas Nedarim l'Maiksiv. How does he understand the Ze Adavar Parshas Nedarim? Loimar to tell you that Chacham Matir ve'ein Baal Matir. Only the Chacham can be Matir and not the Baal, and Baal Mefer ve'ein Chacham Mefer. That's how Beis Shammai will learn. And Zeh Adavar b'Shchut Echutz l'Maiksiv. What is the limit of Zeh Adavar b'Shchut Echutz? Loimer al Ashchita Chayiv ve'ein Chayiv al Hamalika. You're Chayiv for Shchut Echutz, but you're not Chayiv for Malika b'Chutz. Malika is when the Kohen shechts a bird. He doesn't shecht it. He puts his nail through the back of the neck of the bird. Ela Beis Shammai lahachshir gimel hajoytos minolam. How will Beis Shammai know that by Nedarim, you don't need one Yochad Mumcha, you also have the option of using 3 adjoitos? He learns it from this limud of Rav Asi bar Nosson. The Chsivit says, "Vayidaber Moshe es Mayadei Hashem el bnei Yisrael." In the parsha of Mayados, we have a shaila. V'tanya, Rabbi Yosy Glilamer, Mayadei Nemru, v'lei Nemra Shabbos Bereishis Iman. In the parsha of Mayados, it doesn't mention Shabbos there. Shabbos is not mentioned in the parsha of Mayados. We're soon going to see that Shabbos is mentioned, but at first glance, this is what the Bryce is saying. Shabbos is not mentioned in the parsha of Mayados. The word Shabbos Bereishis is how the Gemara refers to Shabbos. So Shabbos is not mentioned in the parsha of Mayadim. There's nothing written about the parsha of Nedarim in the parshas of Mayados. Again, it's like a strange question. What does Nedarim have to do with Mayados? But it's going to come out soon. So when you learn this Bryce's verse, it's very strange. The parsha of Mayados doesn't have Shabbos. Parsha of Mayados doesn't have Nedarim. Okay, so what's the point? So Rabbi Asi bar Nosson had a problem. He didn't understand what this Bryce was trying to say. So what did he do? Also learn Arda, the Kamet Reb Sheshes. He went to the Arda to ask Reb Sheshes Pshat. Reb Sheshes wasn't there. So also Basrei l'Mechuza. He traveled to Mechuza. That's how much Reb Asi bar Nosson wanted to learn Torah, that he ran wherever he had to go in order to get an explanation of this Brisa from Ben Azai and from Yosy Aglili. Amrlei, this is what he told him. Mayadei Hashem nemru v'loy nemru Shabbos b'reishis iman. You're telling me that in the parsha of Mayados, it doesn't mention anything about Shabbos, but that's not true. V'aksiv Shabbos iman. It actually does mention Shabbos in the parsha of Mayados. V'su Mayadei Hashem nemru v'loy nemru Parshas Nedarim iman. Are you telling me that there's no Parshas Nedarim but a parsha of Mayados? That's not true. At the end of the parsha of Moyados, which is the end of Parshas Pinchas, right? Pinchas is what we learn. All the mafters that we learn on Yom Tov all come from Parshas Pinchas. So Pinchas is Parshas Moyados, and what's right after Pinchas? Matos. Matos is the parsha of Nedarim. So how could you say that they're not mentioned there? Let's see what the Ran tells us. The Ran tells us that V'aksiv Shabbos b'reishis iman, the Beseder Emor alakayhanim in the parsha of Emor Ksiva Shabbos u'mayadis basar hachi b'chata parshosa. In the same parsha of Mayadis and Emor, it does mention Shabbos. Then the Gemara asks L'gabi Nedarim v'misidra Ksiva parsha Nedarim Ksiva b'ktzei parsha Mayadis, because there's also a parsha of Mayadis in Parshas Pinchas, and right after Pinchas comes Matos. Sitra is Ksei, so we know the Sitra Achra is the other side, the dark side. So Sitra just means the side. On the side, in other words, right after Pinchas is Matos. So let me explain to you what this brisa is talking about. Moyadei Hashem. It has the Parsha Moyados right by Shabbos. It says Eila Moyadei Hashem Mikroy Kodesh. Davka these Moyadim Shrichin Kiddush based. They require Kiddush based, meaning when Bezdin is Mekadesh the Chodesh, that gives us the date, which then determines when Yom Tov is. But Shabbos Bereishis ain't Srichin Kiddush Bezdin. Bezdin does not do Mekadesh Sunday. Today is Sunday, and then you count from there 7 days, and you have Shabbos. Rather, Shabbos comes automatically without any declaration of Bezdin. So that is what it's teaching us, that only Mayadim are totally in Klal Yisrael. That's why we say Mekadesh Yisrael Bazmanim. We have to be Mekadesh. It's considered it's a Rusa de Lasata. Doesn't mankind creates the Yom Tovim. Mashek in Shabbos, the Kedusha comes. It's a Rusa de La'ela. It comes from Hashem. We don't need to have any input into Shabbos. Shabbos happens by itself. Mayadei Hashem Shrichid Mumcha. We also learn from the fact that it's right near the parsha of Nedarim. We dash Mayadei Hashem Shrichid Mumcha. In order to be able to be Kadosh to Chodesh, what type of dayanim do you need? You need dayanim mumchen. The ain Parshas Nedarim Shrichid Mumcha. Afilu bezin shalajoitos. You can even use a bezin shalajoitos to be mat Nedarim. So this is the limit that we know this from according to Beishamai. Right? According to Beishamai, we didn't have the hekesh. We didn't have the Gzera Shava from Shchut Echutz. So we know it from the fact that the Torah places the Parsha of Nedarim right after the Parsha of Mayados to tell you that although by the Parsha of Mayadim you need to have Bezdin Mumchin, you don't need such Mumchin when it comes to being Mat Nedarim. In fact, Gemara, how can you say that? For Parsha Nedarim, Moshe Matis Ksiv, that's when only one person is doing it. So now we have a whole big sugya of what is this Yachid Mumcha? What are the qualifications that someone who's Mat Nedarim has to have? So let's look at the last line of the Ran, Ein Chesam Aleph, which is referring to the Gemara that we just learned on the base. This is a massive machlokes. If he's a mumcha, then he could be matter and nether by himself. And from the Eila Mayad Hashem, only Mayadish require the real Bezdin to be Mekadosh to Chodesh. But Nedarim don't require such a high level of qualification. The Yochid Mumcha, the Shari Nedarim, is Davke Ke Mumcha Shomayadei Hashem Tanu Moshe V'Aaron. It seems from our Gemara that 3 people, you don't need anyone special. But if you only have one person, the Rosh Matos, you need Mamish, a Yochid Mumcha. Because we're comparing it to Mayadais, and we're saying you need the same level of Godel for Nedarim as you need for Mayadais if you only have one. If you have 3, it's relaxed, right? But if you have one, it has to be the same level of someone who can be Mekadosh to Chodesh. Then Havrish ben Zelazah, Ella, Shemayad Hashem, Tzrichen Shloisha Mumchen. For Mayadim, for Kiddush HaChodesh, you need 3. Nedarim Sagi B'Yochid. So the Ran seems to be medayik from our Gemara that who the Yochid Mumchen we Kimat Nedarim, only someone like Moshe and Aaron, which really means no one today can do it. Aval Rambam's al Kosev B'Perek Vav Meichel Shavuos, the Choshu Rav Muvik, anyone who's a Rav, Mater Yechidi. He doesn't have to be like from the Sanhedrin. Amru, that's what the Gemara asks over here. But Parshas Nedarim, Rosh Hamatis Ksiv, Loi Parach Amai Damar, the Parshas Nedarim, Eina Tzricha Mumcha. The Kash is not because the Gemara said Eina Tzricha Mumcha, because Rosh Hamatis doesn't say you need a Mumcha. The Rosh Hamatis lav Smuchin Mashma. When it says Rosh Hamatis, it doesn't mean Smuchin. The Bechol Duchti, the boys Mumchin, Eloi Him Karilu. Whenever you need real dayanim, mumchim smuchin from Moshe Rabbeinu passed down, there it uses a lashon of Elohim, kashashin Elohim, which is not kodesh, it's choil, it's referring to Bezdin. But just saying Rosh Hamatos doesn't indicate that high level of smicha. Even like Sivbahu Ela Rosh Hamatos, Shita to lav mumcha samach kamar. So then what's the Gemara's kasha that it says Rosh Hamatos, indicating you need a musmuch? Ela l'may darmini da filu gimel had yoitos parak. We're not saying you could have anyone. You need to have someone of stature. The kasha is, how could you allow 3 joitos? Rosh Hamatos says you need someone of stature, not necessarily a musmach, but you still need a karov. The Rosh Hamatos, the leimashma munchum, afilu hachi lav joitos. Nevertheless, they're not joitos. A Rosh Hamatos, you need to have someone of stature, but he doesn't necessarily have to be the someone who's musmach. Okay, so that's the machlokes. The machlokes is this yochid mumcha that the Gemara tells us is needed for nedarim. Does it have to be a musmach, or could it just be a rav, a talmid chacham, which is how the Rambam passes? Gezok the Gemara weiter. Amar Chanina. Chanina says hashoisik almanas lemenka. Someone who hears his wife's neder and he's quiet until the end of the day or for 24 hours. That's considered akil, we said. But what if he's not really being quiet because he wants to be mekayim? He for sure doesn't want to be mekayim, but he wants to spook his wife. You're playing with Nedarim, I'm not going to be made for you so fast. But avada, he doesn't mean to be made for. So if he's quiet without the intention of being mekayim to Neder, clearly he has intention not to be mekayim to Neder. Is that shtika also a shtika that would be considered a kiyum? Let's see the Ram. To get his wife upset. She'll panic thinking that he's going to be mekayim neder. He has full intention of being maker. So in his mind, he doesn't want a neder. A regular guy who's quiet is because it doesn't bother him. Here's a guy who knows he doesn't want a neder, but he's not telling her because he wants to spook her a little bit. So what is Allah? Or Leminkat, Meifar, Afilin Mikan Vajud Yomim. He could even hold out for 10 days, he will still be able to be Meifar. Motzah Rabba, in fact, Rabba. Emasai, Omru, Meisabal, Nisrek, and Nurishus La'av. I'm sorry? No, we ask him. He'll tell us. He'll tell us. So Zaktamar, Emasai, Omru, we slug up the Gemara, slugs him up anyway. Emasai. Under what conditions do we say that if the Baal who is an Oris died, the father could now be made for her Nedarim completely? Is Bizman Shaloi Shama Habal. That's if the Baal never heard another. Or he was quiet and it didn't a day didn't pass yet. Or he was actually made for. And if you remember, we had to change the gears around there, like we're going to do here. Either Bizman Shaloi Shama Habal. So you see that he had to be shoshak umeis by b'yoyim. Avol shama v'kayim oisha shama v'shosak umeis b'yoyim shal achrov en yochel. So with this brayso says shosak, this brayso doesn't say what he was thinking when he was shosak. It says in all circumstances, if he was shosak, even if he had full intention of being mafir the nether, but he was shosak, it still expires after a day. So my love is shosak almanas l'meika. When it says shosak in the brayso, and doesn't specify his intention, it's mashma any type of shtika, even the shtika with his intent to be mefer, it's also going to expire after a day, and it'll be considered a kiyum. So we could say that when it says shoysik in the brisa, it's b'shoysik al manas lakayim. For the Gemara, you can't say shoysik al manas lakayim because it already says shama v'kayim. Ihagi hainu oy shama v'kayim. So the shtika here can mean a shtika with a specific intent to be mekayim. So the Gemara, okay, a little bit shoysik stam is speaking where you stam shoysik, he didn't want to deal with it. He didn't think yes, he didn't think no. But if he actually thought no, then in fact, like Rav is saying that, I'm sorry, not like Rav Chanina is saying, in fact, that it would not be considered a kiyum if he had a specific intent to be mefer. He just didn't express it. He's trying to spook her. That would not be considered a kiyum. And the brisa includes either shosak with the intent of being mekayim or shosak without any intention at all. Okay, gewaltig. Okay, we'll stop here.
What happened to Devarim Shabalev and of Devarim?
The Gemara, I think the Ron's going to deal with that. I think we're going to end up dealing with that tomorrow. I believe that's brought up. The Shaila of Devarim Shabalev is brought up. If there's a umdana, then you don't say Devarim Shabalev, but it's going to come out tomorrow, I believe.
All right, I'll stay tuned.
So please remember to catch me on it if we don't find it. I know what it means.